But first, a man serving life in prison for a murder-for-hire killing in Guilford County is now out on parole after nearly 3 decades. The reason? He was sentenced under previous guidelines. WFMY News 2's Grace Holland heard from experts who explain the law and how it applies to this case.
Let's go back in time first. Leroy Wentzel was the triggerman in a plot to kill his brother-in-law back in 1991. Court records say Wentzel was hired by his wife's sister to kill her husband, Fred Brown. Wentzel shot Brown along Highway 68 in High Point and staged it to look like a robbery before fleeing to Alabama. The case was unsolved until a few years later when Wentzel was arrested on other charges. Investigators found letters which detailed the crime and connected Brown's wife to the case. Wentzel went on to testify at her trial detailing the killing.
He fell to the ground. I walked over to him and I was scared. I didn't know if he was dead or what. And I thought if he wasn't dead, he could tell on me. So I shot him 2 more times in the back of the head.
He was sentenced to life in prison on a second-degree murder charge, but was paroled today after serving nearly 30 years because he was sentenced under old laws.
He would have to have been sentenced under the old law that we had, where everybody was eligible for parole. Now, being eligible for parole doesn't mean that you're necessarily getting out early, but you have the possibility.
North Carolina now uses structured sentencing, which mandates a minimum and maximum amount of years an offender can get for their crime. Ben Finholt says under structured sentencing, no one can get life for second-degree murder anymore.
People's sentences would often be reduced by half or more. And so as a move towards more truth, where people would serve the amount of time that was actually written on the piece of paper on the judgment for their sentence, the North Carolina legislature enacted structured sentencing.
That law change only applies to cases after October 1994. Since the murder happened in 1991, it meant Wentzel remained parole eligible. Legal experts tell me this is one of a shrinking pool of cases able to get out early through the old law.